Ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all for coming. Before we get underway, I'd just like to let you know that we have simultaneous translation available, and as I understand, the channels for your information are number 1 for English, number 2 for Arabic, and number 3 for French. And without further ado, please let me hand you over to the chair.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I call this meeting on the Advisory Commission to order. At this time, I invite members and observers to consider adopting UNRWA/CN/Agenda 2014/11V5 as circulated in the last days. You will find this on the table in front of you. If there are no objections to the agenda in front of us? No? We shall consider the agenda adopted. Thank you. We shall now proceed to the formal opening session. It's now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Mohammed Taysir Bani Yassin, Secretary General of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Jordan, who will deliver an opening address. Your Excellency.
Thank you. سعادة المفوض العام.
Your Excellency, Commissioner, Your Excellencies, the heads of delegations, and ladies and gentlemen. Allow me first to convey to you the regards of His Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and his apologies for not being able to attend this important meeting due to circumstances out of his control and his travel accompanying His Majesty King Abdullah II. Although His Excellency is always interested in attending this important meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to welcome you on behalf of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, the government of Jordan. We convey to you the regards of the government and people of Jordan and their deep appreciation for your efforts to ensure the success of the ADCOM through your continuous work to provide assistance and support to UNRWA, through which basic services are offered to Palestinian refugees. And this is an endeavor that we must support, and we should not allow to be diminished in very sensitive circumstances that the Middle East and the entire world is going through, which prompts us to want UNRWA to be financially stable because of your loyal and continuous support and service of the Palestinian refugees and their just cause, in spite of the several difficulties and challenges facing them. We also renew our deep appreciation to UNRWA, and at the head of it, the chairperson, Mr. Ibrahim Paul, and we appreciate his role in continuous coordination between the government of Jordan and UNRWA, and we renew our appreciation to all of its staff for their continuous efforts in serving Palestinian refugees. Ladies and gentlemen, we are confident that your discussions and deliberations in this meeting will lead to results and recommendations that enhance the work of UNRWA and will continue its work in performing its vital role in fulfilling the growing basic needs of over 5.7 million Palestinian refugees, and advocating for their cause at the UN and with the international community at large. We stress here once again that we in Jordan, under the leadership of His Majesty King Abdullah II, God bless him, will spare no efforts to offer any forms of assistance and help to our Palestinian brothers throughout the occupied Palestinian territories. And the main guarantee that would prevent the cycle of destruction and then rebuilding, as what happened in the Gaza Strip, is represented by the solution, the two-state solution, through reviving the talks without delay. And these peace talks must be serious, controlled and governed by a time frame that is accompanied by absolute stop in single side actions that may hinder or stop the talks or target preempting the results by Israel's attempts to change the status quo or the legal status of the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem, or those that target Islamic and Christian territories, namely Al-Aqsa Mosque and Al-Haram. Jordan will address this through all means, through the Hashemite rule over these areas and the sponsorship by His Majesty King Abdullah II, God bless him. The alternative would be to push the region to more extremism and tensions. Jerusalem to Jordan is a red line, and Jerusalem and its holy territories remains a main trust that we maintain, so that it remains a symbol of peace for the followers of the three holy religions. And today, in view of all of the regional transformations and the possibilities, we stress the need to support the Palestinian rights and the aspirations of the Palestinian people, whose cause is strong because it is a just cause. Ladies and gentlemen, in view of more complex regional and international circumstances, through political and economic and social changes, it is anticipated that the general environment will be unstable, and it might become even more unstable. And after the passing of 66 years on the establishment of the UNRWA, there is cause to think about two main issues. The first is represented by the role of the UNRWA and what it needs to enable it to perform its mandate more effectively. This is on one hand, and the way the international community interacts with it, not as an international institution, that offers not just development assistance and relief only, but rather as a body that embodies a just cause, and a main title for supporting the international community's support to the Palestinian refugees and the right to a dignified life until such time a solution is found to this important cause through resolutions, namely 194 of the UN. We all know that UNRWA, specifically at this time, suffers from a suffocating financial strain because the donor countries haven't provided the necessary resources to enable it to continue its noble humanitarian role in serving the community of Palestinian refugees in their area, 5 areas of operation. Ladies and gentlemen, Jordan is considered among the most important areas of operation for UNRWA, as we host over 42% of the total refugees in the 5 areas of operation of the UNRWA. And Jordan has, under the direct directives of His Majesty King Abdullah II, has offered the full available support to UNRWA and has cooperated with it in all areas. And it has also, over a span of 66 years, offered direct and indirect services to the Palestinian refugees in Jordan. in order to guarantee them a dignified life, because the amounts spent by Jordan annually for this purpose exceed the budget of the UNRWA, and this meant an additional burden on Jordan. And Jordan continues to offer even more because of its commitment in view of regional circumstances that you are all aware of, that have led to the bleeding of our already limited resources and has ensured unprecedented pressure on our infrastructure and has presented a challenge to our country, especially economically, and its natural resources, especially water. In this regard, the government of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan watches closely and worriedly the gap in UNRWA between what it needs to fulfill its goals on one hand and its financial resources on the other. Especially since this year's budget does not fill the requirements of the basic programs offered by the agency. This comes at a time when the Palestinian refugees are in dire need of UNRWA and its services in view of continuously difficult regional circumstances that have left an impact on all societies and specifically on Palestinian refugees. And this places the donor countries and the international community before their joint responsibilities to assist the UNRWA in playing their vital and important role and expanding the scope of their operation through addressing the organizational deficiency in the funding of the UNRWA, through implementing its strategy to mobilize resources so that it can entrench and diversify the base of donors, and it continue its efforts to raise funds, especially for the general fund of the UNRWA, to offer services appropriately. We urge all the donor countries to provide the necessary financial resources that will guarantee the services of UNRWA and maintain their ability to respond to the growing needs of the Palestinian refugees in a way that will also reduce the burden on the Jordanian government. Ladies and gentlemen, thus, we must all stress that the UNRWA must build its strategic plan listed on your agenda for the years 2016 to 2021, which reflects the unique role of the UNRWA, which can operate in various contexts by overcoming the main and obvious challenge, which is providing the necessary funding that will enable it to provide its programs according to its mandate and address the following: the regression and decrease in its basic services and the challenges that have not been addressed, by applying necessary measures to address these challenges, by establishing a plan based on programs and its actual needs and not based on the available resources. Second, UNRWA in the preparing of its ordinary budget must take into account the inflation and its impact on the services and salaries of its employees and the long-term funding of the programs of UNRWA, and increasing its contribution according to the increase in the required services. The UNRWA must work to create a true vision of the Palestinian refugees outside the camps and their needs. This must be reflected in the needs, along with the plan to develop the camps in Jordan, which is always impacted because of the instability in the region and the conflicts and the urgent appeals. We must separate the three budgets when mobilizing resources. And fourth, Jordan encourages strategic alliances with international and regional organizations and NGOs so that they can enhance the role of the UNRWA while maintaining the main role of UNRWA in providing basic services to the refugees based on the decision for its establishment. We are confident that we offer a united vision on the needs of UNRWA, and the strategy will determine the efficiency of UNRWA in offering the best possible service to Palestinian refugees in the next 6 years. And more importantly, the strategy stresses non-sustainability of refugee circumstances and stresses to the international community the need to resolve the problem of the Palestinian refugees. Commissioner General, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would like to stress the Jordanian government's concern for the continued development and cooperation with UNRWA and offering any necessary support to it. And I thank all international organizations and bodies that offer assistance to the UNRWA that enables it to perform its duties, in the hope that this meeting will be an opportunity to renew your commitment to continue the work of UNRWA and your call for supporting and continuing efforts to protect this important international organization and enabling it to perform its noble duties and enable it to fund the gap in its budget until a just solution is found for the cause of the Palestinian refugees, which enables them to return, and compensation. And peace be upon you.
Chair of this meeting, I will now proceed with my opening statement. Mr. Secretary General, Mr. Commissioner General, dear colleagues, let me allow myself to express the gratitude to the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan for the kindness to yet again hosting us. It's an honor for me to share the Advisory Commission at this critical point in time, and I honestly look forward to listen to and to work with all of you to ensure the constructive and successful outcome of this important deliberations. And allow me just a brief reflection. Let us imagine for a second this square table being round. And around this table we are all partners, host governments, donors, the agency, and our discussions should be in a true spirit of partnership, respectfully providing advice to the agency to the benefit of the Palestinian refugees. And our discussions should be focused on the strategic issues rather than dwelling on micro questions. This year, indeed just a couple of weeks ahead, the 65th anniversary of the establishment of UNRWA will occur. Throughout the decades, UNRWA has played a crucial and unique role for millions of Palestinian refugees in the Middle East. And this can also serve as a reminder and commemoration of the 65+ years of not resolving the Palestine refugee issue. UNRWA will have to continue to play a critical role until the refugee issue is resolved. Throughout the years, UNRWA has had to operate in difficult circumstances. Unfortunately, this continues to be the case. In this context, UNRWA is an important stabilizing factor in a continuously fragile and unstable environment. During the whole time since the agency's formation, UNRWA staff has been in the forefront. In their work in supporting Palestine refugees, they have consistently shown competence, sense of duty, and a strong courage. They have done their service despite facing serious risks and difficulties, not the least during the past summer. Some have paid with their lives. And I would like to express our sincere and heartfelt condolences to their families and colleagues. Our thoughts go to the families of the 11 UNRWA staff members killed in Gaza in the hostilities over the summer, and to the families of those UNRWA staff members killed in the line of duty in Syria. The nature of the Middle East conflict, as well as its long history, has inevitably meant that the Palestine refugee question has grown in importance and scale far beyond what was foreseen when UNRWA was established more than 6 decades ago. The organization faces expectations that sometimes go beyond the mandate, as well as constraints, often due to financial difficulties or due to violence and difficulties that are difficult or impossible for the organization itself to influence. We have to bear this in mind when we assess UNRWA's abilities and performance. A strong UNRWA requires an organization which continuously strives to improve, to learn and rationalize, but this can only be achieved within a framework that takes realities on the ground into account. The recent hostilities in Gaza highlight the importance of a strong spirit of cooperation among all members in this room. Our common objective to support the refugees in accordance with the mandate given by the United Nations General Assembly has become even more pertinent as the demand for services increase. I am convinced that we all share a vision to do our utmost to, together, constructively face the challenges ahead. The situation requires efforts from all of us. The ADCOM has an important role to play in supporting UNRWA. ADCOM has an important strategic task as a body and through its individual members, to ensure awareness of UNRWA's mandate and to assess the challenges UNRWA is facing comprehensively. Sweden is convinced that all parties in a constructive manner will contribute to identifying the challenges and jointly finding ways to overcome these challenges. As you are aware, Sweden has recently recognized the state of Palestine. The Swedish government has considered it an appropriate moment to take this step. There are several reasons for this, but allow me to underline that one of the reasons was to give a signal of hope to Palestinians, including refugees, that there is a peaceful way to take, that there is a viable alternative to violence and to the current status quo. We will continue to stand committed to a peaceful and negotiated solution of the refugee issue. As we all know, in all 5 areas of UNRWA operations, many Palestinians live their lives under severe difficulties. The hostilities in Gaza the past summer remain an everyday fact for the citizens. Close to 100,000 people lost their homes, which in itself constitutes an immense tragedy and challenge. Thousands are displaced, and housing is desperately needed. Many of these are refugees eligible to UNRWA support. The mechanism for reconstruction is a positive sign, but rebuilding the lives of refugees and other citizens will require huge further efforts. In Syria, the conflict shows no or little sign of abating, and this leads to particularly grim conditions for the Palestine refugees. Many have been displaced a second time, taking their refuge to Lebanon and Jordan. And this is obviously a burden to the host countries, but also a challenge to UNRWA. And we are impressed and filled with respect in view of the immense generosity from the host countries. As for now, we do not see an end to this grim situation, but Sweden continues to contribute financially to alleviate the situation in those countries and has just decided to allocate further resources in support to the host communities in Jordan and Lebanon affected by the influx of Syrian refugees. We face many challenges ahead, but we cannot succumb to the difficulties and escape from our common responsibility in supporting the Palestine refugees. Despite the many obstacles UNRWA faces, we have reason to be hopeful. The medium-term strategy, the MTS for 2016-2021 that we will discuss later today, will provide UNRWA with a new and efficient tool in fulfilling the mandate. And I honestly salute UNRWA and UNRWA staff for the accomplishment. And I also thank colleagues who have contributed in this truly inclusive process. Nevertheless, the financial situation remains dire. Obviously, the level of funding of UNRWA needs to correspond to the increasing demand for services, but this will not be enough in the end. I'm confident that the process set in motion by the midterm strategy will lead UNRWA to become an organization doing more with available means that maximizes the impact of every intervention. At the same time, I hope and expect that the new resource mobilization strategy will become a tool through which new partnerships are formed. New partnerships that ultimately are to the benefit of the Palestinian refugees. Sweden has been and will continue to be one of the agency's main supporters, both financially and politically. This year, we have contributed approximately $5 million. Out of this, 80% is unearmarked support to the general fund. And we intend to continue our financial support on a similar level in next year and onwards. And we hope that other countries and partners are considering increased contributions, but not only contributions in the form of unearmarked support to the general fund. That is of crucial importance for the well-being of the organization and the Palestinian refugees. In closing, it's my conviction that the multitude of challenges that UNRWA is facing must be met by a multitude of means, including increased cost efficiency, new partnerships, and a steady inflow of resources, adequately meeting the needs of Palestine refugees. However, let us always bear in mind that the long time overdue challenge lies elsewhere, in finding a long-lasting and just solution to the Palestine refugee situation. Thank you. So, I'm now pleased to invite the Vice Chair of the Advisory Commission, the Director of the General Authority for Palestine Arab Refugees of Syria, my friend Mr. Ali Mustafa, to make his statement to the ADCOM. Mr. Mustafa, the floor is yours.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. السيد الأمين العام لوزارة الخارجية والمغتربين في المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية، السيد المفوض العام لوكالة الأمم المتحدة لإغاثة وتشغيل اللاجئين الفلسطينيين، السيدة نائبة المفوض العام، السيد رئيس اللجنة الاستشارية، السيدات والسادة رؤساء وأعضاء الوفود. بداية نتقدم بالشكر للمملكة الأردنية الهاشمية على استضافتها لاجتماع اللجنة الاستشارية الذي يأتي مع مرور 65 عاما على صدور قرار الأمم المتحدة رقم 302 تاريخ 8/12/49 القاضي بإحداث وكالة الأمم المتحدة لإغاثة وتشغيل اللاجئين الفلسطينيين الUNRWA لتقديم الخدمات للاجئين الفلسطينيين وحتى عودتهم لديارهم وفق ما نص عليه قرار الأمم المتحدة رقم 194 لعام 48. وبالرغم من كل الأزمات التي مرت وتمر على اللاجئين الفلسطينيين، تثبت الوكالة بأنها على قدر كبير في تحمل مسؤولياتها وتقديم خدماتها الرئيسية للاجئين الفلسطينيين في التعليم والصحة والإغاثة والشؤون الاجتماعية، وفي برامجها الطارئة بتناغم تام مع ما تقدمه الدول العربية المضيفة للاجئين الفلسطينيين من خدمات على مر السنين ومن دعم كبير لا حدود له لوكالة الغوث بغية
in order to mitigate the suffering of the Palestinians up until time they are returned to their homes. and also through the generous contributions from donor countries from the onset of the start of the UNRWA, whether the normal budget, which is the base, up to those related to emergency projects and humanitarian responsiveness budget, not to mention strategies, support, the medium-term strategy, which also needs financial support to reach its goals. The ADCOM occasional and consecutive meetings without missing a step with the support from the subcommittees is a clear declaration of the commitment of the international community for the continuity and necessity of continuity of UNRWA in giving its services and primary emergency services to the Palestinian refugees. And in this regard, we look forward to the support of the donor agencies and increased donations and humanitarian responsiveness, not to mention widening the donor base in order to allow UNRWA to go on with its services and support to Palestinian refugees to overcome the deficit that is affecting its work, that reached about around 68 million, and the deficit in the emergency responsiveness strategies and budgets. We reiterate our support to UNRWA and Mr. Pierre, the DG, and Margot Ellis, the Deputy Commissioner General, and all those working at the UNRWA for the outstanding effort in finding ample support and increasing their donations, expanding the donors' base, and the reiteration at all international stance on the necessity for UNRWA to go on with its services to Palestinian refugees and to stop the Israeli aggression on Palestinian people in Gaza Strip, West Bank, depicted in its continuous wars and demolishing infrastructure, killing innocent, and violating the Islamic and the Christian shrines, confiscating lands, colonization, and continuous assault on the premises of the UNRWA. We give our thanks to the General Commissioner and all those working at the UNRWA for their continuous adamant resources to serve the Palestinian refugees who see UNRWA as a hope of light and reiteration from the international community and commitment to their case and not giving up on them. And once again, this cannot be solved void of UN resolution and 194 resolution 1948 in order to meet that and realize that it's very important for us to forever stand together as donors and host agencies to support UNRWA to give it strength and more effectiveness and to carry out its duties, services, programs to all refugees, Palestinian refugees, seeing to their needs, which coincides with the continuation of the reforms seen by UNRWA through all of its educational, health, social, welfare, relief programs that had really had positive impact. At the end, I reiterate what the head of the consultative committee said, the importance of active participation by hosting donor countries to such a meeting to support UNRWA and the refugees. Thank you very much.
And it now gives me great pleasure to invite the Commissioner General of UNRWA, Mr. Pierre Krembühl, to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, distinguished delegates, colleagues, I'd like to begin by thanking His Excellency Mohammed Taizir Bani Yassir, Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, for welcoming us here, for hosting this meeting. I would also like to thank the Chair, Excellency Per Orneos, for his important role and for the message you shared with us, and Mr. Ali Mustafa of the Syrian Arab Republic, the Vice Chair. My appreciation also goes to Ségolène Adon of Switzerland, who has so ably led the subcommittee meetings with the support of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan and the United States of America. It's a pleasure for me to address you again. Since our last meeting in June, I had several opportunities to hold fruitful discussions on a wide range of issues with many of you, host countries, long-standing donors and new partners. I am pleased to see the strong and cooperative relationships that continue to grow between us. It is something that I'm very committed to, and in that sense, it gives me pleasure to welcome the Undersecretary for International Cooperation and Development of the United Arab Emirates, His Excellency Hazza Mohammed Al-Katani. It's also very important to look forward not only to having the Emirates here in the future represented as part of the Advisory Commission and becoming full member, but also to acknowledge that we look forward to that with Brazil represented here today by Ambassador Paulo França, and also acknowledge the joining here today of Qatar, represented by Abdullah Al-Ham. As I begin the statement here, in my statement, allow me to underline how deeply affected I am personally and as Commissioner General by the loss of so many colleagues in recent months and years. I wish and I thank the Chair for having raised this issue and deeply appreciate your expression of solidarity. I wish to pay tribute to the 14 colleagues killed in Syria since the beginning of the conflict in 2011, and we still have 24 others missing there as well, and to the 11 colleagues killed in Gaza this summer and another colleague killed in the West Bank in 2013. Let me say here that I will never get used to such losses, and I will never forget the meetings that I have had with many of their families. Allow me also to inform you briefly of a few changes that have occurred and will be taking place in my senior leadership team. First, a colleague who has been invaluable as I got to know the agency myself. I'm of course referring to Deputy Commissioner General Margot Ellis. Margot, this is your last advisory commission meeting with, and UNRWA and I would like to take this opportunity really to deeply thank you personally for your remarkable service, for your outstanding and generous support to me personally in this time. I think everyone knows that your positive spirit and experience will be truly missed. I also want to thank Salvatore Lombardo, the Director of External Relations and Communications, and Peter Ford, our Senior Fundraising Executive and my representative to Arab countries, who will be leaving shortly. Both have been instrumental in bringing UNRWA to where we are now in terms of relationships and support from the donor community. Salvo and Peter, you will be dearly missed, and I commit to ensure here that continuity of both your spirit and energy be something that we carried forward and assured in years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, at our last meeting, I described the situation of Palestine refugee communities as unsustainable. Since then, the trends have become even bleaker. The pressures on Palestinians and Palestine refugees are immense, and the threats to their lives, livelihoods, and future are of such magnitude that indeed hope is needed somewhere on the horizon. Hope in this most unstable region can only and must be brought about by resolute political action. Halfway through its 7th decade of existence and action, UNRWA is an illustration of what can in many ways and has in many ways been achieved for Palestine refugees over this period. But we are also a living reminder of what happens when no political solutions are found to address the underlying causes of a historic injustice. Throughout my statement, you will hear confirmation, if it was needed, of UNRWA's profound commitment to serving Palestine refugee communities today and in the future, consistent with the mandate, role, and responsibilities we have been given by the international community, particularly the UN General Assembly. You will also hear that we find it impossible, year after year, to accept the failure to resolve the fundamental issues of occupation, blockade, and conflicts that affect Palestine refugees so severely. I call here for determined and structured political leadership by the international community in this regard. I do so because we are among the best placed to daily observe and highlight the human consequences and costs of the ongoing denial of dignity and rights of Palestine refugees. In that context, I am convinced that it is our responsibility both to provide services to refugees and to advocate for an end to this intolerable reality. I do so also because over my first months in office, I have become increasingly aware of an issue that I believe even our most long-standing supporters, and many of you here in this room may underestimate, which is that with your support, UNRWA has achieved one of the most remarkable processes of human capital development in the developing world, in particular in the fields of health and education, as underlined once again in a recent World Bank report. Palestinians have always greatly invested in education, something UNRWA was able to build on and expand. And I often hear comments about the burden for all of us, but also for donors, to continue assisting an ever-growing number of Palestine refugees, when in actual fact, you have, through UNRWA, supported a major investment in knowledge and skills and should take at times more credit for this outstanding accomplishment. There are many developing and middle-income countries that would envy the Palestinians for the quality of their human capital. As we know, there is one thing that Palestinians envy others for, and that is the fact of having a state. The creation of a Palestinian state, living beside and coexisting with Israel, would be one of the defining measures of the sustainability of this decades-long investment. Allow me to highlight some events and changes since we last met in June. As field directors will later present their updates in the next session, I will focus only on a few key parameters. To begin with, of course, we are all struck by how unstable and radicalized the wider Middle Eastern environment has become. And we're deeply aware that host countries and many other states have this on their minds and are very often at the center of their attention. And I'm thinking here, of course, in particular of the developments in Iraq and Syria that have intensified since the summer, including with the role and operations carried out by Daesh. After the strong focus on Palestine this summer, there is now a real risk that attention shifts once more to a multiplicity of other crises in the world, and that it becomes once again challenging to draw attention to the fate of Palestine refugees. We are making a determined effort that this not be so, because we know it is a risk the world cannot take. In Syria proper, the effects of the conflict continue to be catastrophic for Syrians and for Palestine refugees alike. Fighting continues to be ferocious in many areas, and the patterns of indiscriminate and often deliberate violence against civilians remains very critical. Over 60% of the Palestine refugees are now displaced or have become refugees a second time over in Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, Egypt, or beyond. Fleeing this conflict, though, is becoming more difficult by the day as borders are closing, forcing refugees to take increasingly dangerous routes across Daesh territory or the Mediterranean in attempt to, alongside many others, reach Europe. Yarmouk remains an example of how civilians suffer from the unresolved conflict. 16,000 to 18,000 civilians are still trapped, living in hunger, cold, and constant fear. UNRWA recognizes the facilitation of the Syrian authorities that enable distribution of food and certain other humanitarian items, but since the summer, there has been a noticeable decline in what the agency has been able to bring into Yarmouk. Far more needs to be done in terms of assistance and of protection for the people of Yarmouk, something that continues to be explicitly and openly raised with the Syrian authorities. In Syria, 76 UNRWA schools, more than 2/3, have become unusable, most because they were damaged by the conflict or are now in areas too dangerous to reach. A further 15 are in use as collective shelters, housing 6,000 people together with Damascus training centers. Schools engulfed in the fighting is another dramatic example of the disregard for the sanctity of civilian life showed by parties to this conflict, and it must be condemned. Lebanon and Jordan continue to pay a heavy price for regional insecurity and the conflict in Syria in particular. We use every opportunity we have to pay tribute to their hospitality and emphasize the need for international community to support the two countries. In Lebanon, as you know, 400,000 registered Palestine refugees live in often very difficult economic and social circumstances, many in overcrowded refugee camps. In addition, approximately 44,000 Palestine refugees from Syria have fled to Lebanon, almost all of whom UNRWA is assisting with health, food, and educational services. We believe that Palestine refugees from Syria should continue to be admitted to Lebanon, notably those in need of special medical treatment and those seeking to reunite families. In that context, we welcomed the news this September that Palestine refugees could renew their visas for 3 months, even if their stay in Lebanon had been irregular. Let us not forget another displaced population still in need for urgent assistance in Lebanon, the remaining refugees from Nahr el-Bared camp who await rehousing. In Jordan, which hosts the largest number of refugees registered, of Palestine refugees registered in any single country, 2 million, many in this refugee community have been able to secure a living. Others face economic and social hardship. UNRWA's role remains important to the human development of the refugees in general and to the most vulnerable refugees in particular. Jordan is also hosting over 14,000 Palestine refugees from Syria who have been assisted by UNRWA. They should be, in our view, allowed to remain until the conflict subsides and conditions for their return to Syria improve. Allow me here to say that we believe that more can be done in both countries to prevent stigmatization of Palestine refugees. In this context, I wish to note that circumstances for Palestinians arriving in Egypt from Syria are becoming increasingly challenging. This is a matter that UNRWA is regularly engaging the Egyptian authorities on, and we are grateful for Egypt's readiness to discuss these issues with us. Turning to the West Bank, the situation of the 750,000 Palestine refugees there has also worsened. We have seen a sharp increase in the number of refugees killed and injured in operations by Israeli security forces involving the use of live ammunition. Just last month, there were 149 injuries, 3 times the total for the whole of 2013. There has also been a 50% increase in Palestine refugees killed compared to the same period last year. UNRWA is concerned about the threatened forcible displacement of approximately 7,000 people in around 45 residential areas, including the sensitive E1 area. Forcible displacement of persons from land under occupation would represent a breach of international humanitarian law. Many of these Bedouin are registered with UNRWA as refugees. Overall socio-economic conditions in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, continue to deteriorate for Palestine refugees, with systematic Israeli restrictions on the movement of Palestinians and their conduct of trade causing widespread poverty and unemployment, including in 19 refugee camps. This is compounded by the pressures resulting from further illegal settlement constructions, and recent events in Jerusalem itself have raised the very serious specter of widening insecurity and violence. In Gaza today, Palestine refugees and non-refugees alike are just emerging from unprecedented violence and destruction experienced during the 50-day conflict in July and August. Over 1,500 civilians, including 538 children and 306 women, were killed. Some 1,500 children have been orphaned. 11,000 people injured, including 1,000 children, who will live the rest of their lives with permanent disabilities. 5 civilians in Israel were also killed. Many of you have, in the meantime, visited the Gaza Strip yourselves and seen with your own eyes the immense destruction, leaving 110,000 people homeless, the loss of livelihoods and of businesses. And at the peak of this crisis, almost a third of the population of Gaza fled their homes. UNRWA alone sheltered and assisted almost 300,000 displaced in 90 of our schools. Today, some 27,000 remain sheltered in 18 schools. And as you know, we were affected by several incidents of munitions fired at our schools. In 3 cases, with deadly consequences, resulting in over 42 deaths and an estimated 200 persons with multiple injuries. We unreservedly condemned those attacks on UN premises and called for investigations and accountability, investigations by Israel, a call I repeat here today. We also discovered weapons components hidden by Palestinian groups in 3 of our schools. We were proactive and transparent in informing all key parties about these discoveries, and we publicly condemned these violations. The independent board of inquiry established by the Secretary General will look into these major incidents, notably those that affected UNRWA during this crisis. The focus, as you know now, is on rebuilding Gaza. We welcomed the Cairo conference and the significant pledges made. These need urgently to be transformed into actual disbursements. We welcomed Prime Minister Hamdallah's visit to Gaza in early October. Ongoing leadership by the Government of National Consensus is needed to ensure that the reconstruction can take place. A genuine commitment by Israel is also required to enable the needed material to be brought into Gaza. For the time being, the process is much too slow and largely ineffective. Should this continue, we will reach the winter with no progress in rebuilding the homes of the many people still displaced, including those still in UNRWA schools. This should not be a time for wait-and-see attitudes on anybody's side. The actors who agreed to the temporary mechanism should be held accountable for its implementation. Time, ladies and gentlemen, is running out in Gaza. Tempers are rising and people are desperate. The only way this sense of despair can be overcome is to make Gaza a livable place again. This means, as the Secretary General has recently emphasized, once and for all addressing the underlying causes of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, an end to occupation that has ground on for nearly half a century, and a full lifting of the illegal blockade on the Gaza Strip. There is no doubt in my mind that after years of collective punishment of the population in Gaza and after the recent devastating conflict, it is simply not conceivable to return to the pre-existing conditions under the blockade. A change of paradigm is needed, and only a dedicated and determined political process by the international community can bring it about. Now, when one considers all those developments, one comes to recognize the existential nature of the threat faced by Palestine refugees. And it is against this troubling background that UNRWA has been developing its next medium-term strategy. Our Director in Planning and I will give a more detailed presentation in a separate session, but allow me to highlight a few elements. First, I wish to underline that the MTS is the product of considerable consultation, and my sincere appreciation goes to the Advisory Commission members for the quality of the input received throughout the process, and in particular since the last session we had in June and during the different subcommittee meetings. This MTS presents UNRWA's statement of intent for the agency's operations for the period 2016 to 2021, based on thorough analysis of the growing and evolving needs of the Palestine refugee populations. It outlines UNRWA's strengths and areas of required improvements in meeting these needs and providing access to vital services for all refugees who seek them, with particular attention to the vulnerable who need these services the most. The strategy is designed to be applicable in any security context, including those most intense and violent conflicts. The MTS lays out a set of strategic outcomes designed to address the needs of Palestine refugees, and UNRWA will very actively mobilize support and resources to achieve those outcomes. UNRWA's response will focus on its clear mandate from the General Assembly and comparative advantages, which will include the scale and geographic coverage of its operations, its coordinated and diversified programming, and above all, its workforce, the majority of whom are Palestine refugees themselves and members of the communities we serve. UNRWA's strategic priorities will begin with a focus on protection and rights for all refugees, including the most vulnerable. I personally felt strongly that advocating for the rights of Palestine refugees should be the first outcome, because at the end of the day, however good services are, they will never fully compensate for the unfulfilled legitimate expectation of refugees to see their rights respected. The 4 very important program service outcomes are central to the MTS. The MTS is also more explicit on the need for further improve the conduct of emergency operations. It is also strong in terms of commitments to new forms of partnerships, not, and I insist on this point, to weaken or outsource core areas of UNRWA's work, but to widen the scope of what can be done for refugees and complement areas of expertise of UNRWA. On this point, I would like to emphasize that we shall continue making progress in our education and health reforms, which will be essential to fulfilling the objectives of this next MTS. In addition, as reflected in the MTS, the planned spin-off of UNRWA's microfinance program will proceed in consultation with all of our stakeholders at the relevant junctures. To that end, the director of the microfinance program will hold discussions with stakeholders in the weeks and months ahead. In order to be successful in the implementation of this strategy, we have defined 3 management commitments. As I highlighted in June, this will involve building on many existing fundraising relationships and partnerships, developing new long-term relationships and partnerships with both states and private sector, and addressing some underlying internal elements of UNRWA's difficult financial situation. Furthermore, we will continue to work on operational and organizational effectiveness. Completion of our enterprise resource planning system in early 2015 will improve essential agency-wide support functions in our headquarters, including finance and human resources. We will also finally engage staff and refugee communities in more systematic and inclusive ways. To help spur this process, I have commissioned, with donor support, a number of staff relations initiatives which will be spearheaded by my office over the course of 2015. I want to update you briefly on the current financial situation and provide some information on the 2015 budget that I will soon be approving. The deficit in June when we last met was around $70 million, 70. It is currently at $45 million, a little lower than last year. I want to thank those of you who have already provided and some who may still provide additional means to help us balance the budget at the end of this year. You recall, and I had committed to this, to first make internal cuts in expenditure before returning to you for additional funds. This commitment was kept since we reduced the deficit by $18 million this summer, as conveyed to you in my letter of 19 September 2014. For next year, we anticipate a financial shortfall of around $65 to $70 million. I have been working with my colleagues to reduce the expenditure increases previously shared with the subcommittee, and those increases have now been brought down from $25.2 million to $19.2 million. We're still trying to reduce this further before the final approval of this budget. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we may be able to continue to just about find immediate resolution to our financial difficulties in 2015, and maybe just about for 2016. But let me be very clear. We are reaching an organizational crossroads, and action must be taken now to change UNRWA's financial predicament. I reiterate the commitment I made when I addressed you at my first Advisory Commission meeting, and on many occasions since, to take action to remedy this and deal with some of the underlying elements of our deficit. This includes a decision to begin working on these issues not in 2016 when the MTS begins, but from early 2015. At the same time, I remain deeply engaged in outreach to develop existing and new partnerships. Next year, we will take stock of our strategy thus far, culminating in a new resource mobilization strategy for the period 2016-2018, which we will share with you in November next year. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, let me state once again that at the heart of the destiny and plight of Palestine refugees is an unresolved conflict, an ongoing occupation, and a lasting injustice. This is now compounded by the devastating effects of the recent conflicts in Gaza and Syria. Over the past 65 years, against many odds, UNRWA has contributed to a significant process of human capital development which all should take more pride in. However, the current mix of conflict, occupation, and blockade are now at times seriously reversing many of the gains made in the fields of health and education. Investment made in Gaza are regularly destroyed by bombs. Gains in the West Bank are curtailed by settlement expansion, and progress in self-sufficiency in Syria is being blown to pieces in the conflict. In almost all fields, unemployment is pushing increasing numbers into poverty and dependency. UNRWA has been a provider of important services and has proven an ability to respond in crisis. Even if this has come, as I stated earlier and the Chair stated, at a considerable price with the loss of many colleagues. Nevertheless, UNRWA is able and highly determined to continue playing its indispensable role, but it should not be taken for granted. Ladies and gentlemen, the refugee communities need support, but they now also need solutions. While the conflict in Syria risks dragging on, the question must be asked if the international community can really afford to have the Israeli-Palestinian conflict remain unresolved and a constant source of oppression, humiliation, and despair in the region. The answer is most clearly no. It is time for a change of paradigm and attitude, time to overcome skeptical and pessimistic views. It is time for energy and commitment to resolve one of the longest-standing conflicts of our time and provide a basis for a just and lasting solution for the refugees themselves. I thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner General. Thank you so much for your statement. Excellencies, colleagues, as you heard from Mr. Krenbühl just now, we are very much looking forward to welcome Brazil and the United Arab Emirates joining us as full ADCOM members next month. And I add my welcome to Ambassador Paulo Franca, the Brazilian representative in Ramallah. Welcome. And to His Excellency Hazza Mohammed Al-Qahtani, the Undersecretary of the Ministry of International Cooperation and Development of the United Arab Emirates. I understand that His Excellency Mr. Al-Qahtani will not be able to stay throughout the meeting, but would like to say a few words to the ADCOM personally. So before we conclude this opening session, it's my pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Al-Qahtani. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to the Secretary General at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you to the Commissioner General at UNRWA. Thank you to the Mr. Chairman of the committee, ladies and gentlemen of the ADCOM. May peace be upon you. I'm happy to speak to you today at this meeting, at this ADCOM meeting for UNRWA. And this meeting aims to address a number of topics, including the MTS and preparation of response plans, and other topics as well that are on the agenda. I hope to God that we will be successful with outcomes that will help contribute to support the Palestinian people and support the efforts of UNRWA. And also, I would like to thank at the start the government of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan for hosting this event, and I would also like to thank His Excellency Nasser Juda, the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Jordan, and also all of the members of the esteemed committee. It is clear that the UAE, and ever since it was established by Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan, it is clear that it had the Palestinian cause at the top of its priority list as a very important issue in regards to foreign affairs. And the UAE has been advocating for the Palestinian people and supporting it in creating a dignified life. This approach has continued by the UAE, also under its current leadership, represented by Sheikh Khalifa and also Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the Prime Minister, and also Sheikh Zayed bin Nahyan, the Prince of Abu Dhabi, who is also commander of the armed forces and who has always supported the Palestinian people. And there has been joint cooperation between the UAE and UN agencies that have been working on developmental and humanitarian issues, and particularly UNRWA. Because UNRWA is one of the most important agencies supporting the Palestinian people and protecting the Palestinian people. And it has been supporting more than 5 million Palestinian refugees in Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and the occupied Palestinian territories. And if we look at the partnership between the UAE and UNRWA, we see that we have a number of accomplishments and agreements that have taken place in order to convey the Emirati assistance, whether in Palestine or in neighboring countries. Dear guests, the state is committed to the Palestinian cause, and ever since 2011 until now, we have supported this cause with more than $290 million in the form of projects, developmental projects that aim to support the infrastructure and support services as well, in order to provide a dignified life to the Palestinian people. And the state has also provided assistance and relief to overcome the effects of the Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people. And the Emirati Red Crescent and other Emirati organizations have contributed in this regard. In addition to organizations such as the Dubai Institution for Giving and the Global City for Humanitarian Services. And so the state is a main partner in supporting the Palestinian cause, and therefore when we support UNRWA, we believe in our partnership with UNRWA, and we believe in partnership with the international community under the auspices of the UN. And therefore the state, ever since 2011, has also provided about $94 million to UNRWA to support its actions. And after the latest Israeli assault, we provided close to $25 million, which included a field hospital, an Emirati field hospital at Deir al-Balah, and also creating an air bridge, so to speak, that conveyed tons of humanitarian assistance to Gaza. And we also provided basic necessities. In last October, and during the donors conference in Cairo, we undertook to pledge $200 million. And there was an agreement between the Red Crescent in the Emirates and UNRWA. And the value of the agreement was also in the millions of dollars. So once again, we affirm that the UAE seeks to enhance its relationship with UNRWA, and we have requested to be a member in the ADCOM. And we hope, therefore, that based on our experience, we will be able to provide humanitarian and developmental assistance. And we hope we will continue to be able to do so that we can help achieve UNRWA's objectives. And we would also like to learn from UNRWA's experience, its rich experience, now under the leadership of our dear friend Pierre. And we want to enhance our role in international relief and assistance in a way that helps provide a dignified life to Palestinian refugees. May peace be upon you. Thank you.
Excellency, and I think we all look very much forward working with you as member of the ADCOM. Very welcome. Thank you. So this now concludes the formal opening session, and I would like to humbly ask members of the press corps to leave the conference room. And before we pause for a coffee break, I would like to give the floor to the Secretary of the ADCOM for a few housekeeping arrangements, informations. Mr. Asif Naviati, please.
Thank you very much. I would just very simply like to inform you, for those who are not already aware, that we have behind us in the room through that door a secretariat room if you need to use computers, printing facilities and that sort of thing. And also if you wish to have bilateral meetings that aren't already scheduled, it's available to you. There are 5 tables there. In addition to which, there are 2 meeting rooms in that direction, just off the lobby area there on this floor. They also are available for you to book for your bilateral or other meetings. And the Commissioner General's meeting room, for those who have meetings with the Commissioner General, that is 1 floor above this in the club lounge, which is really the business center. So for those, please contact Hadil or Rasha, both of whom are behind me right now. Wireless internet access is also available to you. I would also just very quickly like to let you all know, on behalf of the ADCOM chair, that he will be hosting a reception tonight, and I'd like to encourage you all to attend. There will also be 1 or 2 special guests attending as well, who we will introduce you to a little bit later on this afternoon during the last session of the day. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Asif. So we will now recess for a 30-minute coffee break, and I suppose we meet again 1:45. That is 2:45. Thank you very much.